Welcome back to the Wargrove of Woe, and in today's video, I'm updating one of the first videos that I ever uploaded, my Nighthaunt Battleline Explained. This video is covering all of the Nighthaunt Battleline that you can get in their new 3.0 Battle Tome, and I'll be discussing their merits, what they're good for, as well as my personal opinions on the various units. Without further ado, let's get started. Before we get into the meat and potatoes of the units, I'm going to go over some army-wide rules that all of them will have access to, so you can keep that in mind when I'm discussing their merits. All of these units will have access to sub-faction abilities. Each of these units, if they are within 3 inches of an enemy, would prevent them from doing the CP to ignore bravery at the end of the battle shock phase. They have an army-wide ward of a 6-up. They have ethereal saves, meaning that they ignore positive and negative save modifiers. They can retreat and charge. Every unit has some effects that they can inflict on the enemy, depending on the unmodified charge roll. Every unit has 6s to hit, auto wound, and 3 units can deep strike in pre-game. So you deploy your units, and then you can pick 3 to deep strike. Now, let's get into it. First up, we have the Chainrasp Horde. As the name implies, this is the cheapest of your battle line units, and as such, it is mostly cannon fodder. Their stat line is 8 movement, 8 bravery, 1 wound, and a 5-up save. Their 1 melee profile, malignant weapons, is 1 inch reach, 2 attacks, 3 for the leader, 4s and 4s to hit and wound, no rend, 1 damage. Additionally, they have 1 unique ability, where if they charge, they get a +1 to wound if they've charged. So for their battlefield role, Chainrasps are cheap, you can field a lot of them, and they go down easily. So for your army, if you want to include a lot of Chainrasps and put them in Expert Conquerors just to have more bodies count for more so you can really lock down an objective, that is a good idea. But overall, I find Chainrasps fairly underwhelming. In addition, their unique ability doesn't really synergize well with the overall Nighthaunt abilities of auto wounding on 6s to hit. So sometimes their unique ability just doesn't do anything. But moving on. The Grimghast Reapers are a very good offensive ghost unit. They have a stat line of 8 inch move, 10 bravery, 1 wound, and a 4-up save. They have 2 melee profiles, the Slasher Scythe, which is 2 inch reach, 2 attacks, 4s to hit, 3s to wound, 1 rend, 1 damage. And then the Death Kneel, which is the weapon for the leader of the unit, which is 2 inch reach, 1 attack, 3s to hit, 3s to wound, 1 rend, and D3 damage. For the unique ability, they get 1 attack to their slasher weapon if the target has 5+ models. As I said previously, these are your offensive ghosts, and they are best used against larger units, but because it is a 5 or up, it is fairly forgiving, as unless the target is a very elite 3-man unit or a hero, you are always going to be getting that +1 attack. Grimghast Reapers share a very similar role to Bladegheist revenants, but they are cheaper and they don't require a sub-faction to be taken as battle line. We will be talking about the Bladegheist revenants later in the conditional battle line section. Spirit hosts have changed significantly in their battlefield role, moving from their old book to the new one. Their stats and melee profiles have stayed more or less the same. It's really the unique abilities that has changed. Their stats are 8 inch move, 10 bravery, 3 wounds a base, and a 4-up save. Their melee profile is Spectral Claws and Daggers, 1 inch reach, 6 attacks, 4s and 4s to hit and wound, no rend, 1 damage. Their unique ability is a 3-up bodyguard roll, where you can pass wounds or ward saves off onto the unit, but these cannot be negated in any way. So this is very good to keep your very important Nighthaunt heroes alive for even longer. Unlike their old rules, the new Nighthaunt Spirit Hosts are all about being a defensive unit to safeguard your critical heroes. These are here for wounds to essentially put them on your heroes as opposed to their old rules, which was dishing out mortal wounds. To maximize their effectiveness, I would take in minimum squad units to keep them glued to whatever hero you don't want to die. Now we have Hexwraiths, a very interesting unit for Nighthaunt, and one with some interesting stats and abilities. Their stat line is 12-inch move, 10 bravery, 2 wounds each, and a 4-up save. They have 2 melee profiles, the Spectral Scythe, 1-inch reach, 2 attacks, 3 for the leader, 4s to hit, 3s to wound, 1 rend, 1 damage. And the mount attacks, Hooves and Teeth, 1-inch reach, 2 attacks, 4s and 4s to hit and wound, no rend, 1 damage. For the unique abilities, they can double their movement characteristic, but they cannot charge if you do so. And they do D3 damage on the charge on a 2-up. Now the Hexwraiths have this wonderful movement abilities that I think really make them unique. Hexwraiths have become a very key outrider unit for the Nighthaunt as they are incredibly fast, moving a potential 24 inches plus a run if you choose to do so, giving you a lot of movement capabilities to secure flanks, secure objectives, or otherwise harry your opponent and make them think about these Hexwraiths and what they can do to their positioning. They have okay melee abilities, but really I see their usefulness as their movement. To maximize their effectiveness, take in a minimum squad size to use as fast board control units. Before we move on to the conditional battle line units, I would like to give thanks to our Patreon supporters, and an extra special thanks to Nick Hoff. If you would like to become a patron, there will be a link in the description, as well as a link to our Discord channel. I would love to see you there. Moving on to conditional battle line, we have the Bladegheist revenants. They are battle line in the Scarlet Doom subfaction, and like most Nighthaunt units, they have the standard 8-inch move, 10 bravery, 1 wound, and a 4-up save. Their melee profile, the Tomb Greatblade, is 1-inch reach, 2 attacks, 3 for the leader, 3s to hit, 3s to wound, 1 rend, 1 damage, and their only unique ability is +1 attack on the charge. Bladegheist Revenants are the most effective standard offensive battle line unit, tied with the Dreadscythe harridans for the best offensive ghost. I think that the Bladegheist Revenants, although more expensive than the Grimghast, are better because their conditional +1 attack is much easier to consistently utilize, especially with the army-wide charge and retreat. They require very little to utilize fully and are very simple. They can be taken in any squad size, but personally, I prefer larger units to soak up and maximize your buffs. Moving on to Dreadscythe harridans, they are battle line in the Quicksilver Dead subfaction. Their stats are the same as most of the Nighthaunt: 8-inch move, 10 bravery, 1 wound, and a 4-up save. Their melee profile is where things get interesting. They have Scythe limbs, 1-inch reach, 4 attacks, 5 for the leader, 4s to hit, 4s to wound, no rend, 1 damage. For the unique abilities, you have +1 to hit and wound if the target is already wounded or that unit you are targeting has lost models in the same turn. Also, if this unit charges an enemy, they give out a -1 to that enemy unit. Dreadscythe harridans are a very unique offensive ghost type, and they have a very high potential because of the Nighthaunt auto wound on 6s to hit. They, I think, are a bit more of a utility as opposed to the Bladegheist, which are just kind of straightforward. It requires a few more conditions to be met to maximize their value, but just the sheer number of attacks they get really drives home that 6s to hit auto wound. Unfortunately, they don't have a rend characteristic, which can hurt, as opposed to the Bladegeists. To maximize their effectiveness, you can do one of two things. You can either take in a maximum unit to mega buff them for offensive weight of dice, or you can take them in the minimum squad size to give the -1 to wound for various enemy units in combat. So, a very good unit. Next, and probably least, are the Craven Throne Guard. They are battle line if you have Kurdos Valention in your army. Their stats are the same as we've previously mentioned. Their melee profile is Wicked Sidearm, 1-inch attack or 1-inch reach, 1 attack, 2s for the leader, 4s and 3s to hit and wound, no rend, 1 damage. Their missile profile is the Soul Hunter Crossbow, 12-inch reach, 2 attacks, 4s to hit, 4s to wound, 1 rend, 1 damage. For unique abilities, 1 in 5 can have a standard, which gives the unit a 5-up rally, and they can target units out of line of sight, and their ranged attacks ignore cover. The Craven Throne Guard are fairly underwhelming in my opinion. They're incredibly short range, and their lackluster ranged profiles really make it hard for me to justify taking them. They are cheaper than a lot of the battle line units we've discussed today, but I really don't see a good use for them. If you really wanted to get use for them, you could do a deep strike with them at the very beginning of the game and set them up in your opponent's backline to target hiding enemies and just shoot them with that short range. But outside of that, there's not a whole lot of use for them in my opinion. Additionally, if you are really wanting to take them, consider taking in larger units so you can get the maximum value out of the Standard Bearer's 5+ rally ability. And that was all of the Nighthaunt Battleline updated and explained. I personally really like the harridans and the Bladegheist revenants. They are my favorite units out of all of these, but I would love to hear your opinions. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like or a comment, and if you'd like to see more of this type of content in the future, consider subscribing. This has been the Wargrove of Woe, and I'll talk to you guys next time.